Good, that's good. You get more Irish every year.
And now I am going to bring in the brains of the family. We've had enough foolishness. This is my wife, Arlen.
Hi.
Who has all the common sense to be found in this
Oh,
household.
what a sexist remark. That's right, I have no poetry in my soul. I am totally pedestrian, mundane, an object of practical use. No, actually, I borrowed a hat a minute ago. And I'm Mr. Yin, and this is Mrs. Yang. That's for the androgyny crowd. People often ask me how it feels to be married to a genius, and I say, I don't know, you'll have to ask my husband. And if I had longer eyelashes, I'd flutter them.
That's great.
So go ahead, fire away.
Well, what do you do while he's in there? Do you longhand or typewriter?
He types.
I type until my word processor arrives.
Okay, what are you doing while he's typing away? We've already covered that a cleaning house routine is not attractive.
Well, what
to
am I
you.
doing? Okay. The general answer is that I think being a human being is a full-time job. And I think that means every day and every hour. Sometimes every minute you have to make these decisions as to whether you're going to manifest the worst of our bastard genetic potential or the better. Bob is, for a man, pretty smart. He is. But there are things...
Well, I've got a cute ass, but not much brains.
And your kneecaps turning in. No, but I don't think that either gender can really understand totally how life is for the other. But I think it's a lifetime and, as I said, full-time preoccupation, this business of being a human being, which means that we are in a two-gendered species. And that's wonderful and blissful and agonizing and puzzling and confusing and infuriating and marvelous. And there's all kinds of stuff around this two-genderedness. And that's a big part of our job, is fulfilling what we are and then transcending it and bridging to the other.
Have you been together through all of these books?
Yes, we have.
So you have seen this creation
Thin
develop
and through thick. Yes, yes. And I think he made a couple of dedications to me years ago, but they always used to get my goat when I would pick up some author's book, to my wife, my best friend and harshest critic, or something like that. And one time in a book that I even really liked, I noticed that the guy is thanking his wife for taking the daily preoccupations and drudgery off his mind so he could create this beautiful thing. And at that point, my feeling about the book changed. As a policy, I never read introductions, prefaces, dedications, forewords, or any of that.
Or epilogues.
I read only the text. And I have to look sometimes for 70 pages to get to page 1, but I'll do that. I will get to page 1. And then, if I like the book, I like the body of the book, then I will read prefaces, forewords, introductions, acknowledgments, dedications, etc., etc.
Do you read his books?
I do, but not till they're published anymore. I'm just a member of his reading public at this point. I'm too much of a critic.
Do you chat about what's going on?
Oh, well, he bounces ideas off me all the time. I mean, we discuss things in general a lot. And we talk into the night many, many times, which is amazing for people together. But that's what I mean. It takes a lifetime to even get to know one other human being, to say nothing of what humanity as a whole is all about. But it's better if I do not read his books in manuscript. He's extremely sensitive. He is. And I can't really dare to give him a spontaneous reaction, in case there might be one little word of negativity, or that might be construed as negativity. And that I found out early on, and I also figured that being married to a writer, my function was not to be a censor, a critic, an editor, or any of those other things that other people have to fulfill those functions. So consequently, I do not feel responsible for the content of any of these. They are all his karma, his responsibility.
Except that you are 50% of the environment.
At least. I write a little bit myself, but my writing is very sporadic and my creativity is extremely intermittent. I do very short things that I can do at a sitting or just 2 or 3 sittings. It's inconceivable to me, and it's wonderful after all these years to see him going on, being incredibly productive, day after day, week after week, year after year. It's just, there are certain things that I admire very much, and one of them is people who have the perseverance to write books. And other things that are mysterious to me, like people who can conduct a symphony orchestra and remember the whole structure. Well, this is the same kind of almost miraculous thing to me, that a person can be that persistent and that persevering. And Bob, I think he will write as long as he breathes, which of course will be forever, if his scenario comes true. We disagree on that particular issue. We disagree on various issues. But apparently we have enough complementary overlap.
I never claimed I was going to live forever. I just said I think
could.
that I just
It's
think
possible.
that's going to happen eventually. We're going to reach that point in evolution. I don't know if I'll live to see it, especially with all my bad habits.
Did you agree, did you feel comfortable with this move to Ireland?
Well,
Did you
yes, it
agree
was
on that?
partly my idea. It's funny, sometimes it takes years to get something through here. And I talked about this years before we came. You know, in the 70s I was saying, you know, if we moved to Ireland, you wouldn't have to pay income tax. But this is blotted out of his memory.
No, it isn't.
Well, the earliest...
I remember you talking about it as early as 1960.
No, because
Even
it wasn't
before
true.
They didn't have the tax break
Wasn't
for
true at
writers
that
then, but even then you were talking about moving to Ireland.
Well,
I
it
got a
was-
better memory than you think.
It was a fantasy. But when the legislation passed, and I did mention it, it made no effect.
It was a seed.
It was a seed, and those seeds do grow. Isn't it interesting how sometimes you can say just a quiet word at the right time, and even though the person is vehemently opposed to it, it lodges in their head, and it may take a year or 2 for them to hear what you said, but they will eventually very often hear it. Sometimes quoting it back to you,
Oh, yes.
not remembering the source, right?
Do you feel part of the, or that the stories, the dynamic of the stories infect your life here? Or, I mean, do you feel Joyce walking in the door at some point and meeting up with Einstein coming out of the kitchen and having, you know, do you feel the spirits of the dramas that are getting poured onto paper in your household?
I'm not afflicted, thank God, with jealousy of women. The only people I've ever been jealous of, I think, are James Joyce, who's dead, Ezra Pound, who's dead, a few other notable literary worthies who are dead. There have been
You're not
times...
jealous of Schrödinger?
I don't consider him a real threat. Nor Einstein for some reason or other. But No, I have been jealous of Denman sometimes. But that was because there was so much Bob loves and has great capacity to love and admire other writers and to find tremendous nourishment and stimulation that goes on over the years. He never comes to the end. If he likes a writer, he will read him, I know, I hate to say till his dying day, but until a day very far hence, he will be reading Joyce. He rereads Joyce every year, and I will hear chuckles emerging from his office, and I know that he's into Finnegan's Wake.
I read something of Shakespeare every year.
And he rereads Shakespeare. He's in love with Shakespeare.
Brian's just acquired these little, the little books that they sell at Stratford on Avon. Anyway, they're little leather-bound books.
Yes.
Now he's carrying these little books around in his bag with him.
Right.
So I understand.
I'd like to say I reread something by Raymond Chandler at least once every 5 years.
Oh, yes, that's very...
I want to say that because saying I read something of Shakespeare every year might give people the impression I'm saying it just to sound
Right.
cultured. But I read what I like. I don't give a damn that Shakespeare is supposed to be a classic and Chandler is supposed to be a talented pulp writer. I find Chandler endlessly enchanting, because I know the plots of his book so damn well, and the plots were never very good anyway. The plot is the weakest thing in Chandler. I read Chandler just for the style, and I learn something new every time I reread Chandler. I think you can learn more about writing from Chandler than from just about anybody. Just a passing comment.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. That we're looking for those. Do you read?
Do I read? Well, yes, I hardly move my lips at all. I mean,
Some people don't. Some people don't. Some people
no,
don't.
I love to read. I'm a real addict. And I read things that would horrify Bob. Recently, I inadvertently landed in a group that was very heavily into 18th century literature, largely by women. And so, 18th and 19th century. And so I've been having a great time going back over Jane Austen and the Brontes. Well, as a matter of fact, I went all the way back to Madame de Sévigné, who was in, actually in the 17th century. And I'm very interested in women's literature and women's observations and their philosophy and their emerging sense of themselves and their importance as evolutionary agents.
Would this be the
was-
topic for the workshops you were talking about? Or the talks you were talking about?
Well, in the States, I have not particularly addressed the women's issue in the talks I've given there. I don't remember that I have addressed
Well, you
that
did back in the
directly.
60s and 70s.
Oh my God, at the beginning of the movement, I was out there on the streets. I was picketing and demonstrating and chanting and yelling. And I felt that I could bring a certain insight into the movement from a standpoint of more libertarian than strictly left-wing approach. And I ran head-on into convinced and incorrigible Marxists. They were incorrigible. You could not encourage them because they knew the correct answer to everything. So I had a difficult...
There are libertarians like that, too.
There are, and there are Republicans like
There's
that.
the Randroids.
Yes, there are. But, yeah, I started a little group of, we called ourselves anarcho-feminists at the time. And that was during the period when Bob was working for Playboy.
Oh, that's great.
And so, both sides, I'm sure, suspected I was an agent for the other. I kept waiting to get this offer that I couldn't turn down, but it never came. Nobody at all tried to buy me off. But anyway, the anarcho-feminist group, we called ourselves the Siren Collective, right? And we like this mixture of imagery, the warning, the sort of sinister aspect of the siren, and then of course the other siren.
Yeah.
And we had a good time with that for a while. But I asked myself during those years of the early women's thing, was my feminism of such a nature that in order to pursue it, I had to dump husband, children, etc. And I decided that I did not want to do that. But the questions were there, and they were asked and processed.
Did you find any of these issues filtering through the books?
I think I do affect Bob. He affects me. We affect each other. I mean, what we discuss.
Well, I was a feminist before I met her.
Actually, yeah, well, in some ways he's good on that. In other ways, not yet. I mean,
She's still working on it.
Yeah, we have to wait for further developments.
The mold is not set.
Well, it takes little boys longer to mature than it doesn't, right? That's statistically proven. So we give him another few centuries or incarnations, whichever come first, to see. But he shows
the
promise.
elephant next, and we have
Right, yeah. And he shows definite promise.
Well, good. Would you like, if you had anything specifically to say to the world at this point relative to his work or your work, would you have anything to say in the present that would be, something, a message?
Well, I have a lot to say, and I think it would take much too long to go over the whole.
In 25 words or less.
25 words.
Some.
Well, sometimes I can think of pithy ways of saying things. I'm afraid that what I might say now will sound ponderous and sententious and serious, but I really do believe that the man-woman thing is part of an evolutionary leap. I just restrained myself from saying quantum leap. That's getting to be such a cliche.
You mean a balance of the.
Yes, something in this two-genderedness is
Dyadic.
part of our assignment in the dyad, is part of our assignment as human beings. I'm personally not attracted to physical manifestations of androgyny. I mean, people are into it fine, but I have no.
Do you like the separation of the sexes in their particular wholeness?
Well, I mean, if some preparation came on the market that would, the opposite of a depilatory, and I could suddenly grow a beard, I mean, I would not have any particular impulse to do that. I left Bob holding my handbag one time in Greenwich Village when I ran upstairs to get something. And when I ran downstairs again, he said, "Don't ever do that again."
That's a great picture.
But, no, actually we're very fortunate in having gay friends. And I think my kids are fortunate too, that as they were growing up, we had friends of many different kinds of lifestyles. Not that there were not standards in the family, there were, and there are.
Would you say you're traditionalist in certain aspects and then expansive and evolutionary in other? I mean,
like anybody. I mean, the wildest.
A mother's a mother's a mother.
Yeah. I mean, like the wildest radicals I knew back when I was a political activist still generally had 3 meals a day without even thinking about it, that they could get by on 1 or maybe 5 small ones, they follow pretty much a lot of general patterns which they're not aware of, and we all do that. And I'm a firm believer, and I'm not sure that Bob is, but I'm a firm believer in going from the known to the unknown and helping and making it easier for people to bridge and not using shock and confrontational techniques, at least not anymore. I was into that in my youth, but not anymore. I feel it's really important to get people feeling comfortable. and then present a new idea in such a way that doesn't threaten the entire structure of their worldview and their personal lives. And
Soft.
well, I don't. I'm not sure. I would say soft.
Less
Clever.
Clever.
Clever means.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that the Buddhist term?
Mm-hmm.
Skillful means. Skillful means. So you don't freak them,
Mm-hmm.
but you might move them. If you freak them, they'll retreat.
Resist.
But if you kind of make it easier. I'll shut up now and you can ask him some while I pursue my little vice here.
Well, okay, well, let's see now. Where are we in our group of books? Oh, we did Schrodinger's. Now we are on, what's the next one that came along? Out of your well, your never-ending well. If I can bring you back to that, because we don't want to let this go by without catching everything.
Right
the-
where you
on
were
the book.
sitting now. That's a very experimental book. It's some fiction, some non-fiction, some prose, some poetry, some cut-ups. But it does all hang together as miscellaneous as it looks. It's a kind of attempt to provide a panorama of possible futures, probable to possible futures.
And would you say that, let's see, a panorama of possible futures. In other words, you give a selection of Whitman's sampler of possibilities, alternative futures.
Well, it's a kind of montage. It uses cinematic techniques very heavily. I've been trying to get into film for a long time.
Well, you're into film right now.
Masks of the Illuminati has sections written in the form of a film script.
Uh-huh.
And this has sections written in the form of a film script. And I if I can't get into films, I'm making my books more like films. I think I will get into films in the near future.
Uh-huh.
This is one of the great film buffs. I wasn't going to talk for a while, but
Well, now this is
he
interesting.
really is. It used to amaze me. At one time, I used to think there is no such thing as a bad movie for Bob Wilson. He is just entranced with a movie, good, bad, or indifferent, because he's watching the camera angles and
Uh-huh.
he's really getting into it in a way
Script
that
writer.
I don't at all. Well, of course, it isn't that he doesn't have a lot of critical faculty about movies, but he will watch things that I just won't, and really get a lot out of them because he's into production values,
Uh-huh.
whereas I'm into, do I really care about this character, you know? And he's looking at lighting and photography and
Ah, interesting.
set design and
Uh-huh.
all that.
What films have you been particularly fond of?
I like an awful lot of films. Like Arlen said, it's hard to find a bad film as far as I'm concerned.
Uh-huh. How'd you like
But
Blade
you've
Runner?
got your greats. Got your greats.
I think my favorite film of all time is Intolerance.
Intolerance. Who did Intolerance?
D.W. Griffith. I try not to use the word is implies there's something objective. And I try not to say this is the greatest book ever written. When I talk about Finnegan's Wake, I say it seems like the greatest book ever written to me.
No, absolute.
I don't believe in absolutes. It's scientifically inaccurate. I can't say what is. I can only say what seems to me. Intolerance seems to me the greatest film ever made. And that's a kind of sad commentary, although I like movies so much, it's a sad commentary that in 70 years nobody has done better than Griffith did in 1915. But it really seems to me the four stories intercut with each other. Well, that's the structure of the Illuminatus trilogy. I just lifted that. I thought it was a great idea. Why should things proceed in linear fashion? And I interweave themes the way Griffith did. Symphonies are organized that way. And 2001 is another of my favorite films. And The Trial, Orson Welles, and Touch of Evil, and Close Encounters of the Third Kind, King Kong, James Whale's Frankenstein, Behind the Green Door, one of my all-time favorite films, I've seen Behind the Green Door about 8 times, and
He took me once. No, I have to give you my response.
I've seen it.
Good. My response was really perverted. When I got out of there, you know what I wanted? We had been pretty much vegetarian for a number of years before that. I wanted a steak. I wanted a very rare steak with so much pink flesh in that. I couldn't wait to go to a restaurant. Get a steak. Right. Over to you.
Did you do it?
Yeah.
That's
It's
great.
great.
That's great. Well, then, actually, when you're writing these things, for instance, the way that we saw Ulysses done, when Jerry Farrell did it yesterday, I could see that cinematographically, and so you're really seeing your books as you're writing them. In other words, I mean, if you've gotten immersed so much in the movie cinematography thing, you're actually seeing them play out that way, 3-dimensionally.
well, I've been influenced by a lot of things besides books. I think there are symphonic elements in my writing too, and although I've only had one play put on stage, I've written a couple of other plays. I'm fascinated by the different effects you can get in different media. Like you can do things on the stage you can't do in a film. You can do things in a film you can't do on the stage, and so on. I'm interested in experimenting with different techniques.
So if you had an abundance of money, say, or access to huge amounts of whatever, then you would try all sorts of different media.
Oh yes,
Yeah.
I'm fascinated by television. So I was fascinated by television back in the 50s when all the intellectuals were putting it down. I was delighted when Orson Welles came back to the United States. The first interview he gave, he said, Orson Welles, he said, television is in its golden age right now, like cinema was 30 years ago. And I thought, my God, I'm not the only eccentric. I think they were doing great things on television in the 50s.
Really, yeah.
Very experimental, very creative, and they still do occasionally.
Right.
But it's a fantastic medium anyway, whatever is on it. The fact that you can get people all over the world involved in something simultaneously, like Live Aid. It was the first time in history where in one day you had literally hundreds of millions of people involved in a rescue project from one part of the planet. I think that's an evolutionary turning point.
You know, of course, that Bob Geldof is a Dublin.
Oh, I saw a book of
And
his
Dublin
in the window.
is so proud of him at this point. Not when he was just
Starting.
in Town Rats, that hardly ever made the charts, as I recall. But as soon as he became an international personality,
That's what
he
I
is
like
never
him.
referred to in the press without the adjective Dubliner before his name, or Dublin's own, you know.
What do you think of his book? Have you read it?
Oh, I loved what I read of it. It was serialized as a selection in the Irish Times, which is a newspaper that we admire. It's, I think it's a world-class newspaper.
I think it's one of the best newspapers I've ever seen anywhere.
And
And I don't work for them either. I work for a rival newspaper.
yeah. But I loved what I read of Geldof's book, and I have a friend who has promised to lend it, and I want to read the rest of it. Yes, we admire him very much.
Back last year when there were all the moving statues of the Virgin, there was a rumor went around Dublin, there was a picture of Bob Geldof in a disco that was moving too. I think that was the local Dublin wits, actually.
Speaking of local Dublin wits, do you hang around pubs?
Only very selected ones.
Very selected ones. We like quiet family pubs. Don't get too noisy and have a Heimlich atmosphere.
And in some
I love the kind of Irish pub where there's a dog sleeping under one of the tables.
Yes, men, women, children, dogs. You often see strollers, you know, and it's kind of, that's the type of place where we feel relaxed. There are certainly many other types of pubs that are very noisy, very loud, very political, and
The
that
pub
kind
life
of
is significant.
energy.
It's-
But we really like the quiet, laid-back kind. It's a nice custom. It's a nice custom. It's only about 20 years, I believe, 15 or 20 years, that Irish women ever went into a pub. And so the institution of the Sunday afternoon after Mass, taking the kids and maybe the family dog and just letting the men folks sit around with their pints and the women with their gin and tonics chatting. It's really nice. It's something that's just grown up fairly recently.
Mhm.
In the old days, it was strictly a male preserve. And certain pubs still are. Perhaps not legally, but to all intents and purposes they are. The place where your man will go to get away from the wife and kids, But that's not true anymore of the whole scene. Some of it's very family-oriented and it's pleasant and we enjoy it. It's also a great way. Occasionally somebody will get our phone number. I mean, we live very, very quietly here, and we prefer to live very quietly because a lot of work has to get done. If somebody does get through and wants to meet Bob, the socially accepted form here is to say, well, meet us down at the so-and-so at the pub,
Mhm.
And that way you can screen people, whether you want them in your house or...
Sure, we do that.
Well, good.
Mhm. We have the bus depot.
Yeah.
That's very important to me because my books are so avant something that I do attract a certain number of unbalanced types. And back when we lived in California,
Oh.
I let some types into my living room that really, I thought I was going to have to call the police to have them removed. They were so incoherent, unbalanced, and persistent.
Mhm.
It makes you nervous when you don't know how to get rid of types like that.
That's right.
And people would call up in the middle of the night, 3 o'clock in the morning. They had just had hot news from Alpha Centauri, Sirius.
Oh, yes.
And they had revelation from on high. They must communicate
Yes.
this to Robert
Yes.
Anton Wilson. And we changed our phone number 3 times there. We finally had it enlisted. But I got so that I could feel these calls. It's funny, I could detect
Yeah.
a note in the voice, just in the first few couple of
Yeah.
syllables. And I think it was a tension in the throat or some kind of urgency, that I knew right away. That's someone that Bob just met
Even
me.
before I started writing books, back when I was working for the Playboy Forum, I could recognize a nut letter without opening the envelope. You can recognize a nut letter because it's very thick. They always write at least 11 pages, usually 17 pages, single spaced. And they always write on the back of the envelope because they've got something to add. And it's always, on the back of the envelope, they've not only added something, but they've underlined a few words and there's an exclamation point. And when you see that, you can tell, even before you open it, you know what it's going to be like.
He used to be so conscientious in answering all his personal mail, nut and otherwise. And I used to tell him, honey, this is a waste of time. There are just certain people, I'm afraid. I mean, I like the compassionate idea that you reach back to people who reach out to you. But there are people who are really too much out of contact already for this to be workable,
Exchange.
Certainly at a distance. And yet he conscientiously would answer these people and explain to them rationally why the world was not being destroyed by a conspiracy of Freemasons, Jesuits, Knights of Columbus, or whatever particular, or women's lib dictated to from Moscow and Peking. I mean, whatever conspiracy the person would have in their heads, he would try to reason them out of it. But they were already past the reasoning
stage.
approach, and obviously one could give them, send goodwill, good energy, or even maybe a prayer or something like that, but words were not going to do it. It's a waste of postage.
Well,
Speaking of prayers and all of those sorts of things, I noticed that you have the lights fading. You have the Mason, Freemason insignia behind you on that photograph on the mantle. Are you a Mason?
No.
No.
No, I can't be. I'm exposed to many secrets of Freemasonry in my books. When I got interested in Freemasonry, I realized that I could learn a lot more, a lot quicker by joining, but then I'd have to swear the oaths not to reveal it. And it's actually very easy to learn the secrets of Freemasonry. You gotta browse around in secondhand bookstores,
And
and
you
you
find the
eventually
books.
find all the books, Secrets of
Right.
Freemasonry revealed.
Mm-hmm.
And
The only
he would
ones
take
who
an
don't
oath.
know the secrets of Freemasonry are those in the lower degrees.
See, he would take an oath seriously, and so it's better that he not,
Well, you damn well better take
Well,
the Freemasonic oath seriously.
and be in that position.
What would happen?
I was joking. They just changed it last week. We got into the newspapers. The Scotch Rite, which is the largest Masonic lodge in the Western world, in England, Ireland, and Canada, and the United States. The Scotch Rite just recently, last week, the first degree oath used to say, if I ever betray my fellow craft or reveal any of the secrets, I will be hanged by the neck where the rising tide will cover my body. And that's aroused a lot of controversy since Roberto Calvi was found hanged by the neck where the rising tide covered his body. And so they finally taken that part out of the oath. But I would take the Freemasonic oath seriously. And so I thought it was best not to get initiated this way. I can reveal the Masonic secrets without breaking any oaths. Actually, I don't reveal them fully. I've been very scrupulous in my books and only revealing some. I think the system of initiation in Freemasonry is a very potent re-imprinting device, and I don't want to ruin the thrills and shocks for anybody, so I only reveal parts of initiatory secrets so that people who've read my books, if they go ahead and become Freemasons, they'll still get a couple of shocks along the way.
All around.
Yeah, I don't want to ruin the fun for them.
Before our light is gone, I want to complete the book situation and your aspirations, and that sort of, I want to sort of package up the before we lose our light. Can you just sort of run through the rest of those and tell us where we can get them?
There's only one we haven't discussed.
Oh,
That's
good.
Prometheus Rising.
Oh, this is them,
And
yes.
I'll let my most severe critic tell you what's wrong with this one.
No, it's just that, well, I don't know if I can, I'm not sure I could even find the thing that I found so offensive in here. Where's that stupid thing about tacos? Where's that one about tacos?
Oh, that's not in there.
Oh, it's in here. All right.
Okay, we'll get back to Prometheus Rising.
You can talk about Prometheus Rising.
Excuse me, Flash. So, that one has
Prometheus
raised a lot-
Rising is a kind of an attempt to synthesize practically every school of psychology into one general system. And there's some I, perforce, had to leave out, but I've done as much synthesis as possible. And it's a book I'm very proud of. It does manage to state things in a way that Freudians can understand, Jungians and transactional analysis people can understand, Leary and so on. I'm trying to put all the systems together side by side so you can see where they overlap and where they differ. There's room for negotiation.
Did you ever come across Colin Wilson's from Freud to Maslow or something like that?
No, that's one of his books. I've read a lot of his books, but I haven't read that one.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I have now been...
Colin talks about his wife the way Arlen talks about me. He's always putting her down, and I like him a lot, but I don't like that trait in him.
Well, you
But otherwise, he's a very nice guy.
You don't mind my, you don't you don't really mind my attempts to inject a little levity into the gravity of matrimony. I
No,
know,
I just
have a
said, I
chance.
just said he talks about his wife the way you talk about me. That's
and you
all.
didn't like that about him.
Well,
And by implication, you don't like that about me. Well, all right,
I am
dear.
a kindly disposed person. I like
know.
to say, I like to
Actually,
say
he
nice
is-
things about everybody.
he is kind.
And,
But he's a nicer person than I am, actually. He really is, in many ways. But I'm going to practice that Nancy Reagan, I can't do it, but Jane Wyman did it too when she was there. That weird angle of the neck as they look up to their hero and that light in the eyes. You know, if you ever notice in these photographs of the Reagans?
Yeah.
His previous wife did the same thing. Exactly the same weird angle.
Well, they're actresses, after all.
True. I can't find the thing that offended me so much in that, but maybe I suppose maybe I can quote it.
Sure, go right ahead.
Okay. It was something as a profound thought, something like, if God didn't mean us to eat pussy, how come he made it look so much like a taco? So I thought to myself, I have to live in this.
I'm the wife of that person that said that.
no, I didn't say that. I just quoted it.
Oh!
And that was that was
Sorry.
said by the Earl of Nines of the famous Buddha Mind School.
Oh.
And I thought it was one of the most profound metaphysical observations I had encountered in years, and I thought it was worth repeating.
But why
I
did you have to put it in a box?
I gave him credit for it. I gave the Earl credit for it.
That's
I
nice.
think he's one of the great religious teachers of our time.
How about religion?
Let's talk about religion.
Did we finish with Prometheus? That is available currently, yes?
Yes. Mhm.
That is
Yes.
the current word around LA.
It's a
by the way.
synthesis of all possible
Yeah, that's
schools of psychology, including esoteric psychology, Gurdjieff, and so on.
I give this
It's
one
got a nice blurb on the back from one of the leading Gurdjieff teachers in the United States. So I
What's it
guess I
say?
did Gurdjieff right too, along with Freud. and
Where are my
Jung and
glasses? Sorry.
Bray
It
and,
says, this is from E.J. Gold,
Go BJ.
who, yes, who has received communications, apparently, because he writes his books as of Mr. G.
Well, he is Mr. G.
He is Mr. G. But some
Mr.
people
Gold.
think that his revelations come from Mr. Gurdjieff, and he doesn't correct them. He can't be all bad, though. For a while, he was running something called the Fake Sufi School. I thought that was marvelous. That was when the Sufis first came into California, and there were true and real groups, and then there were others that were put down by those as the untrue and unreal, and then in return they would, each one was disengaging from the others. So EJ just started one called the Fake Sufi School. You know, as good as any of them. Actually, it was quite good. He says, by God, my God, not the other miserable cosmic creatures everybody else believes in, Bob has done it again for the first time ever, meaning Bob Wilson. This book is everything I ever wanted to write, and a practical guidebook on how to get here from there. And he's, as usual, first in print again. Just the exercise on finding quarters has paid for the book many times over. That's an exercise.
It works. In Illuminatus, I made the readers aware of the number 23. And for years, everywhere I went, giving lectures, people would tell me about incredible synchronicities with 23s. So in Prometheus Rising, I told people to look for quarters, and you'll find quarters. And people, everywhere I go, they tell me they're finding quarters, in the States anyway.
And he paid for his book by finding quarters.
So in the next book, I'm going to tell them to look for $100 bills.
Oh, start with $10 or $5, come on.
I like it. This is
Yeah.
good. This is a good
PJ gave me, he has these books, Secret Talks with Mr. G, that cost $75 each. He has a little paperback of Secret Talks with Mr. G that's only $3 or $4. But he's got these great big hardbound ones that are $75 each. They're really Secret Talks with Mr. G. And he gave me one free. And when I got home, I saw it written on the title page, to Bob, in memory of the old days in Paris, G. And I don't know whether he really believes he's the reincarnation of Gurdjieff and I'm the reincarnation of Ouspensky or what, or if that's another of his jokes. We saw, he had me as guest of honor at a Cosmic Con that he put on, and they showed the Magic Christian there. And I started a rumor that it was actually based on the Gurdjieff school, and Peter Sellers was playing Gurdjieff. The character he was playing was based on Gurdjieff, and the character that Ringo Starr was playing was based on Ouspensky. And people, after the movie, they were telling me, yeah, I never realized it before when I saw that movie when it first came out. But it really is, and Ringo really captured Ouspensky so well. He keeps asking Peter Sellers, what are we doing, Dad?
Anyway, Prometheus Rising.
Watch out what you say.
Right. Has my seal of approval. And this one has my seal of approval except for the taco jokes.
What's wrong with the taco joke? I think it's a profound religious revelation.
Oh, no. No, it's not. The only profound... I don't know, but from the period of the 60s and early 70s, remember the Fireside Theater?
Yes.
I think actually they're still around.
Oh, yes, but they're, well.
Well, my favorite theological formulation of the latter 20th century is in one of their albums, and it is, quote, we're all bozos on this bus, right? And I apply that to everything. I apply it to the women's movement, I apply it to the communist, capitalist, east, west, north, south dialogue, I apply it straight across the board. We're all bozos on this bus.
Great. I have to agree with you. Well, it's nice actually that you have joined this tape because I don't know whether you were ever a financial supporting character, but many of the sci-fi or novelists or however you want, whoever category you want to put yourself in, are supported by their wives in the early years while the whole thing is developing, and then the wife recedes somehow into the background.
Well,
And
this wife does
never
not recede.
to. Yeah, I can
No,
see you're not a receding wife.
No, recessive. No, but most of Bob and I were actually in a very conventional situation for many years, where I had a bunch of little kids I was raising. Bob was out there 9 to 5, or in actual terms it's more like 8 to 6, by the time you get home.
Sometimes
And,
it was like 7 to
or 7 to 7 or 11 or whatever.
We lived.
He kept working overtime, especially while he was at Playboy. He says he was writing a book during those late hours. But actually he was. That's where he wrote a good part of the Illuminatis. But no, it was really essential for me, temperamentally, to be home with my kids. I had interesting work before that. I'd been a freelance writer for fun. And between marriages and between kids, I would do other things. But then I always got drawn back into the primary thing of being there with children. That's possibly because my own mother couldn't have been more bored with the whole child care thing or running a house thing. She was a musician and a marvelous person, but absolutely, utterly bored with the whole domestic scene. And my sister and I were way down on her agenda. It was quite clear. So maybe I overreacted a little bit to that in staying very much at home during those years. As they grew older, I did go out and a couple of times and worked at straight jobs. But then there was always some domestic catastrophe or whatever that brought me home. Then I found some work that I liked that I could do at home that supplemented the income a little bit in California, and that I enjoyed doing. It was an adult education program. And I love working with adults. I think I would be not a good teacher for small children, but with young adults, I was real good because I learned an awful lot from them. I had bunches of young computer people, and I learned a lot more from them than they ever did from me. But I used to organize workshops and seminars and help people get their academic trip together insofar as documenting what they were actually doing out in the world and being able to give credits for software, for instance, if I thought it was interesting in the educational field. And helped an acupuncturist get her degree. Helped lots of interesting dropouts who, for one reason or another, could not finish the academic trip. And that was very rewarding because some of them have gone on and done marvelous things since then.
Yeah,
That was
sometimes a stumbling block. That one.
It is.
Yeah.
I mean, all a degree is basically a communication device, a kind of shorthand that says, I can do this much, and you don't have to worry about basic literacy or basic,
Right.
And that's not true in all cases. I mean, it's certainly not true in the hard sciences. I wouldn't care to have a pharmaceutical amateur mixing out my prescription just because he enjoyed, doing it. Although God knows we've had enough amateur pharmacists in the past.
Speaking of which, have you been interested in any mind-altering sorts of things like flotation tanks or chemicals of one sort or another?
I'm not into chemicals. I'm into sound, meditation, silence.
Have you tried flotation?
Almost. Damn it! I just missed it by a few minutes at a friend's house recently.
So you would do
I
it
want
if you
to do
were
that.
yeah.
Now, Bob's gone into lots of different areas in consciousness.
Would you care to comment?
Yeah, I've done a lot of meditation and different types of meditation, and I've tried a lot of consciousness-altering chemicals. I think it's the most important development of the 20th century. I think it's as important to psychology as drugs were to modern medicine. And I find it fascinating the way history repeats itself. The early pioneers of anesthesia went through the same sort of persecution that the psychedelic pioneers went through. There are always these, it's the Semmelweis reflex. Something new always creates a witch hunt. The latest thing, I predicted back in the early 70s that machines would replace drugs. I thought biofeedback was the beginning of something that would be much better, much more precise. And now Robert Monroe has these earphone things which coordinate the brain hemispheres and put you into very interesting altered states.
You've tried them?
No, but I just read Monroe's book, the latest book. I tried a device in Boulder which is called the Pulse Star, which puts 4 electrodes just where the EEG puts them to measure your brain waves. Only this device, instead of measuring your brain waves, changes them. And you can turn the dial and go into any brain state you want. And I found it absolutely fascinating because you have total control over it. You can continue it as long as you want and stop it when you want and go back and try it again. And it's so fast. I went into very deep meditation in a couple of seconds, which usually takes 20 minutes to get that deep. And I think Pulsar is one of the most dramatic inventions of the 80s, and I'm sure there are even better things coming down the pike. As for the new designer drugs, I think 4-MEA, unless it turns out to have disastrous side effects, looks to me fantastically promising. Although I'm sure it'll be made illegal and it'll take 20 years before it becomes accepted and so on. But it looks very promising to me. I think it really is an intelligence raiser, which is what I've been looking forward to for 10 years now.
We don't use the intelligence we've got. See, I think all this is cheating. I really do.
She's a Christian Scientist, and
I'm
I
not.
believe in machines, chemicals, and the whole post-Newtonian system.
Well,
we
there's a balance.
We disagree.
Everybody has their,
We disagree on that. I think, to me, the assignment is to work with what we've got.
I like to fly back to California, but she'd go by covered wagon if it was still possible, because machinery is cheating. I know. Well, that's one of the things we have agreed to disagree about.
Horse races.
Well, he's all ready to go into space.
And you're not.
And I'm ready to burrow into the earth and make a nice little dwelling under there. And,
NASA wouldn't take me in the shape I'm in, but if they did, I'd go tomorrow.
Yeah, well.
As a matter of fact, I'd dive into a black hole if it were possible.
He would.
I'm very curious to see what's on the other side of a black hole.
He is a true adventurer. He really is. Well, I'm an adventurer, but in a different way. In a different way. We just have different temperaments.
As for MDMA, I think that's hilarious. The older I get, the less I get emotionally involved in these trips. When you see them over and over again, you don't get so involved. I think it's hilarious the way the government is repeating all the mistakes it made with LSD. And there's more damn MDMA circulating in the States now than before they made it illegal. And of course, most of it's impure. And God knows what kind of bad trips are being created. And they're just running. Arthur Koestler wrote an essay once on compulsion neuroses in politics. Like individuals have compulsion neuroses where they keep repeating the same thing. And Koestler pointed out governments have that pattern. They created the partition of Leipzig after World War I, led directly into World War II, and the partition of Berlin after World War II seemed to be leaning right into a Third World War for a while there. And he gave lots of examples of that. And I find it fascinating how governments seem to suffer from compulsion neuroses. If they do something wrong once, they have to do it wrong 10 times.
Just to make it a real thing, to repeat that pattern.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, are you, besides experimenting with media and various media, do you have a certain life goals that you are looking at? Or are you just sort of taking one day at a time? One subject at a time?
Well, I have long-range goals, but I also have a commitment to trying to take things one day at a time. I think that's the brightest idea to come out of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I didn't know that was AA. I used to see those bumper stickers saying one day at a time. I thought, gee, that's great, I think it's good for all of us, even those of us who aren't alcoholics.
It's hard to keep track of your tax situations, though, one day at a time. We're forced into, for instance, the idea of scheduling 1 year in advance and that sort of thing. It's very hard to live in this society one day at a time.
That's true. It does force you, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm. I mean, I carry this book around trying to keep track of what's going on and live one day at a time. Do you have any sort of disciplines that you do in order to maintain some sort of a calm, one day at a time attitude?
It's hard to describe. I've kind of developed a habit of detachment. I try continually to look at things in the Gurdjieff way, look at things from outside and not think about me, think about it. this is happening to it now. It wants something badly that it can't have, and look at the way it's carrying on, and things like that, to keep myself from being too attached to chemical glandular processes.
If you
It
were,
doesn't keep me from having goals, it just keeps me from tormenting myself with the goals. I have very high goals. I want to change the world. Why aim for anything less?
if you were asking you the most sensible questions, what would you ask you?
I think he's interested in asking himself sensible questions. He's
Well,
interested
relative
in-
to extracting the essence for this
He
piece.
wants to ask impossible questions and unheard of questions. And, why do we have to die? And things like that. Or why do we have to have a police force?
Why do we have to have poverty?
Or why poverty? I mean, he asks that type of questions that other people would dismiss as not sensible. And that's why, even after all the time that we've lived together, that his mind is still interesting to me, very interesting, because he's always asking himself new things and coming up with new and interesting answers that I may or may not agree with. I may disagree quite vehemently, but they're always interesting. I look forward to seeing how his thought and development will be 10 years from now, because I've seen many changes. And I've changed, of course, myself, so that my perception changes as time goes on.
So what would you say?
What was the question again? I got lost somewhere in there.
She was asking, what questions would you ask yourself?
From my point of view, what
If you were in
question
her
would be the
position.
most final approach to this piece that would be the most drawing of the essential gestalt of your mind at the moment? What would be the question to ask and then answer that?
Why am I so damn dumb?
And what would you answer?
Well, the answer is imprinting, conditioning, and habit, and a certain amount of laziness. What can I do about it? That's what I'm working on all the time.
And what can you do about it?
Well, that's what Prometheus Rising is all about, gimmicks for trying to break your habits. It's not just a matter of breaking your behavioral patterns, but breaking your perceptual patterns. I think behavioral patterns continue because certain perceptions continue, and so it's a matter of changing both behavior and perception, which is a matter of breaking down all the habitual circuits. And
How do you do that?
Well, there's no one magic method. It's a constant process of trying different gimmicks to see, like the pole star I mentioned, for instance, and like flotation tanks, which I haven't tried yet, but I'm very interested in.
One of your fans, or the Samadhi people, they are fans of yours. And if you are in LA at some point, if you would call them, they would be ecstatic to put you in a tank.
Ah.
And I'll give you their number.
Yeah, well, as for changing, I think there's a lot of techniques, and well, like Laura Huxley's book, "You Are Not the Target," is full of good exercises, and Prometheus Rising, I have a lot of exercises, and A.J. Gold told me once, he said, you know, you're one of the most naive people I ever met. You think people will really do the exercises just because you put them in the book. But there are very simple exercises. Aren't as complicated and boring to start with as Zen meditation, for instance. As when you're trying to start Zen meditation, it's the most boring thing in the world. But little tricks like change the ring from one finger to another, and while you got it on the other finger, try to think like somebody else that you know fairly well instead of thinking like yourself. Tim Leary has a great game out now, a computer game, where you play being different people, which is a variation of what I was saying, switching the ring from one finger to another and being somebody else. In Leary's computer game, I became William Buckley, and I had to react to different situations like Buckley would. And I was fascinated. I went into the Bankers Club as William Buckley. John Cleese was the head waiter. And when I ordered the wine, he perceptibly sneered and asked to see my membership card. And that was quite a challenge. I had to try to figure out how Buckley would respond to that. Of course, he'd out-sneer Cleese, but I had to get into the proper headset to do that.
I just took my ring off at your suggestion and put it on another finger, so I'm not married. See if it makes me feel different in the morning, it might.
Right. Or this evening for that.
I might walk off with the nearest gorgeous Irishman.
Milkman, the milkman. The Iceman.
I'm never up that early. I can't deal with milkman.
Okay, well, what we are doing then is addressing the unseen public, and if there's anything that you'd like to say that we haven't said that would have you address these people who have never read your book, say, or who are interested in getting to know Robert Anton Wilson a little bit better, now is the time.
Well, like most men, I'm not as bad as my wife says.
Porn's good.
And that's it.